Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Urban County Policy Board meeting. This is June 8th, 2026, and we have a full agenda today, so we will go ahead and get started with introductions. I'll introduce myself and we'll continue around the room here and then we'll go online. I'm Glenn Young. I serve as County Counsel, District 1, and I am Chair of the Urban County Policy Board this year.
Good morning, Michael Torres, Program Manager with Clark County Community Services.
Good morning, Rebecca Royce, Program Coordinator, Clark County Community Services.
Hello, Noreen Ibrahim, Program Assistant, Clark County Community Services.
We'll move online. Joe Walsh.
Good morning, Joe Walsh, City of Washington.
Mark Hersig.
Mark Hersig, City of Battleground.
Stephanie Fields.
Hi, Stephanie Fields, Town of Yakult.
Councillor Ferrer.
Councilmember Ferrer from Battleground.
And we have two presenters, Jenna Kay.
Hi, Jenna Kay with Clark County Community Planning.
And Amy Koski.
Good morning, Amy Koski with Clark County Public Health.
And that's all we have online at this time.
Great, and we do not have a quorum at this moment. And I know Mayor Cole contacted me earlier this morning and said that he would be a little bit late today. So without objection, we'll move approval of minutes unto an undetermined time at this point. That may need to be delayed until our next meeting, but if we do get a quorum during the meeting, we'll go ahead and shift to that. So let's go ahead and go to item number 2, public comment. And is there anybody signed on that would like to make a public comment today? Okay, it looks like a negative on that. So we'll go ahead and move to item number 3. Well, we'll skip item number 3 and move to 4, which is Clark County project presentation. And we'll go ahead and turn, that's the climate change planning. Right. Okay. We'll go ahead and turn the time over to Jenna. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you so much for having us. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Jenna Kay, and I'm a long-range land use planner in the Clark County Community Planning Department. And I've been serving as the county's project manager for the project we're going to provide a brief update on today related to implementing state climate change planning legislation. And I'm joined by my colleague, Amy Koski, who works in public health. So I'll give the brief presentation and then both of us are available to answer any questions that you may have. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so we'll give a brief background on the climate project, discuss proposed policies that may be relevant to this group, look at what's next, and end with any questions. Next slide. All right, so we'll begin with our project background and can go to the next slide. So as many of you may already know from your respective jurisdictions' comprehensive plan updates, House Bill 1181 was signed into law in 2023, and this legislation added a new climate change and resiliency goal to the State's Growth Management Act. And with addition of this new goal, the law also requires Clark County and each of the cities in the county to add a climate element to our comprehensive plans. And depending on the size of the jurisdiction, local government climate elements either need to just address resilience or need to address both resilience and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And some other themes in this legislation include environmental justice and needing to develop policies that benefit those most vulnerable in our community to climate impacts. And there's some other requirements too related to things like use of best available science and being consistent with State Department of Commerce guidance. The Clark County and the cities, we all have a mandatory due date of adding this climate element to our comprehensive plans by December of last year. But I think, as you all know, we've all been running behind on those comprehensive plan updates. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to focus the rest of my presentation on the resilience side of this work as it's most related to the work of this board. And the core resilience requirements for our climate work involve needing to identify goals, policies, and programs the county will pursue over the next 20 years to identify, protect, and enhance natural areas to climate impacts, identify, protect, and enhance community resiliency, including social, economic, and built environment factors consistent with environmental justice, and addressing natural hazards created or aggravated by climate change. So things like more hot days in the summer and more days with smoky air from wildfires. And this resilience work also requires prioritizing actions that benefit overburdened communities that will disproportionately suffer from the compounding environmental impacts and natural hazards due to climate change. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the county's project timeline. We have 5 phases of work, and we're about to enter phase 5. The phases started with research, then moving into development of policies, and then further, reviewing and refining those policies, and then getting those policies ready for consideration in the adoption process. So this timeline probably looks very similar to each of the cities' timelines for their climate work as well. And for the county, we are at the point where we have a draft climate element and proposed policies that are ready to go for the adoption process. But since this work is tied to the comprehensive plan update, the timing of that will happen when the full comp plan is ready. Next slide. We did quite a bit of community engagement as part of this project work. So in addition to facilitating community-wide engagement events, we also work with 3 advisory groups. So we had a community advisory group made up of 20 people appointed by the county manager who represented a really wide range of interests, from people who work in building and development and freight to folks working on environmental, natural resource and environmental justice interests, to people representing community interests like health, youth, and education. And this group was charged with using a consensus-based process to recommend a list of goals and policies for the county to implement as part of its climate element that's consistent with this new law. We also had an environmental justice coalition. This was a group of 15 community-based organizations that the county contracted with to help with community engagement. And these organizations all serve overburdened community members and helped us collect feedback throughout the project that then helped inform the proposed policy list. This group also guided the development of an equity lens that was used to help evaluate and revise draft policies. We also had a partner agency team. This was our technical review team made up of county staff and partner agency staff from the cities, ports, hospitals, school districts, and so forth. So in short, lots and lots of community members provided feedback along the way, and there are links here in case you are curious to learn more. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so let's now look at policies being proposed given that background. So let's go to the next slide. So over the past few years of doing all of that community engagement work and working on drafting some policies that are proposed to be included in the comprehensive plan, the county, we have several proposed policies. We have 7 categories of policies listed out on the screen. So policies related to health and well-being, green jobs, ecological stewardship, transportation and land use, building and energy, waste management, and county governance. And there's one topical area in particular that came out of all of our community engagement work and research on best practices that does relate to this board's work. And that relates to that intersection of affordable housing and community resilience. Next slide. So you're welcome to look at all of the county's proposed policies. They're on the county website, but we just pulled one example goal here related to that topic, and I'll just read it. So the goal says, plan for and support diverse, affordable, climate resilient housing options throughout the county, encourage and support equal access to housing for renters, homeowners, and people without stable shelter to protect health and safety. And then we have a few policies that support that goal that are being proposed. So while we understand that this group's work is focused on recommending fund distribution for programs like CDBG and the home programs, we also, I think, have learned through this process to view that work as having a climate co-benefit and providing a way for all of our jurisdictions to help build community-wide resilience to severe weather. So helping community members stay safe during severe weather events lessens the impacts to human health and safety. So we really appreciate the work that this board is doing to help build resilience in that way, even if these affordable housing programs, that you all are focused on are not climate programs in and of themselves. Let's go to the next slide. So we'll wrap up with what's next and can go to the next slide. Just showing the timeline again, the county is getting ready to begin its adoption process later this summer. So we look forward to seeing what comes out and is approved by the county council. And then we'll be doing future tracking on how all of our countywide work is helping us achieve our climate goals. And I think we just have a last slide that has links to where you can learn more, but otherwise, Amy and I are happy to answer questions if you have any.
Are there any questions? Great. I'd just like to take a moment to thank you, Jenna, for a job well done. I know I've said this many times, but what issue can you possibly look at that is not more polarizing than climate change? And she did a great job organizing a good group of people that sat on all sides of this issue. And all the feedback that I got from those people on that committee was that it was a great process, that it was productive, and everybody was happy with the outcome. So very well done. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay. Should we circle back real quick and go to the minutes? We do have a quorum at this point, correct?
That is correct.
All right. So our meeting minutes for March 9th, is there any discussion or does anybody have a motion? I don't hear any discussion. I don't hear a motion either. I will go ahead and make that. I move approval of our March 9th meeting minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second. Joe from Washougal.
Great. Great. Thank you, Joe. And been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 And are there any opposed? Great. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Now moving on to item number 5, program updates. Rebecca.
Okay, turn on my mic. That's really important things to do here this morning. So there's a few different program updates that we wanted to give to the board this morning. As you hopefully saw in your emails a couple of weeks ago, the county is now going through the Urban County 3-year requalification process. So HUD has guidance that requires that we take a look at our qualification as an urban county every 3 years and allows the participating jurisdictions or units of local government to decide if they want to participate in with Clark County as part of our urban county designation. This is done every 3 years, and we're just starting that process. They have a very specific timeline for doing this process that the county must meet. We received the actual guidance on May 18th with a deadline to send out the first part of this process, which is the notification to all the small cities by June 1st. So they did not give us very much time to do this. And in the guidance that we received from HUD, there are a couple of new requirements that we did not have in our previous agreement, which would require an amendment to the original agreement. Those changes include the addition of specific regulations that are already being followed, like the Uniform Relocation Act. It just wasn't specifically stated in the original agreement. There also is a change to the auto renewal process. HUD's guidance for many, many years has been that you can just have an auto renewal process. It makes it quite simple. We notify you all the jurisdictions every 3 years, and you can submit information and opt out if you want. And if you didn't respond, it just meant that you wanted to stay within the urban county. Now they will only allow an auto renewal one time. So you have to do a full agreement, and then the next 3 year you can do that auto renewal process. because we had changes to the agreement that would require everyone to sign the amendment, we thought it's the best idea to just do a full new amendment now, meet the requirements that are coming, and get it all under one package, make it a little easier instead of having 3 amendments to the original agreement. It doesn't extend the process and what we're doing. Everything still had to be renewed. It just gets us ahead of the requirements that are coming. So we have sent out the letters to all of the cities notifying them that they need to respond with a letter stating that they are interested in continuing on with or as part of Clark County's urban qualification or our urban county. And we need to have those responses by July 7th. So we've received a couple of jurisdictions' responses. We're waiting for the rest of them. But as long as we get them by July 7th, we've drafted the new agreement that has now been reviewed by HUD's legal team, so that we sent it up there to make sure that we met all of the requirements, and we won't have to worry in the end when we send the full package that it'll be approved at that time. Again, there were minimal changes. There was nothing substantial. There were 2 regulations that we didn't call out in the agreement, one being the Uniform Relocation Act, and then the other was making sure that we are more clear in the auto renewal process, what that auto renewal timeframe would cover in the original agreement. They also want to make sure that we're very clear that we call this a cooperation agreement. We don't really use that language in the original one. It is language that HUD requires. So they wanted us to change that. Again, minor changes to the original agreement. Go ahead.
This is Michael Torres. I do want to just state that these changes are not because of any issues with our existing interlocal. These are just changing requirements from HUD. So the regulations that they're asking to be explicitly called out were already incorporated in part of the original agreement. They just want them to be explicitly called out, including some certain subsections. So, I'd say the only change of substance that is there are the new renewal requirements about, official notification via a letter. Not having it done automatically.
The new drafted agreement, we did get some minor feedback from HUD's legal team that has now been incorporated, and we have sent this off to our legal team so that it can be reviewed and get signed by Kathleen Otto on behalf of the county. And once that is done, we will send it out to all of the jurisdictions so that you guys can go through your legal process and take it to your city council meetings for official signature if that is a process that you need to complete. We do know that some of them need to go to city council before they're able to sign the document. Some are able to be signed by the city managers, which is fine. It's whatever your local jurisdiction policies. That's the process that we want to make sure is followed. We do need that initial letter on letterhead by July 7th. We need the fully executed cooperation agreement by August 10th, so that we can again meet HUD's timeline for submitting the full packets of information. Are there any questions about this process?
Rebecca, I do have one quick process question, and I am not entirely certain how this works, being that I'm part of the county council and focused on what the county's issues are with this. But if a city were not to respond, would that mean that they would then be working directly with HUD, or would that mean they just would not be a part of the program in entirety?
So any jurisdictions that opt out of being part of our urban county could apply to the state. The state gets an allocation every year for non-participating cities that are too small to be their own jurisdictions. We don't have any outside the city of Vancouver. All of the small cities that currently participate within our urban county are not large enough to be their own jurisdiction. You have to have at least 50,000 people to qualify as your own jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
One, in addition to that, is what it means to be part of the balance of state is that all those other smaller jurisdictions that fall under the Balance of State Consortium of, at the state level, they compete against each other.
Oh,
When the state puts funding, they do a funding solicitation every year, kind of like we do. But the recipients of those funding solicitations are those members of the Balance of State, and they compete against, it's a much larger pool to compete against.
very interesting. So that means that local dollars essentially, or not local dollars, but dollars from Fed that could be used here locally could end up being spent outside of Clark County.
Correct. And it would change our allocation. So part of the formula for CDBG is the population, specifically the population of low and moderate income households. So if one of the cities opted not to participate with us, then the population would be reduced. So our formula, the amount we receive every year would be reduced, and then that amount would be included in the state's balance of state funding.
Okay, great. Thank
So
you.
it could have impacts to us specifically.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions before I move on to the next topic? All right. We also wanted to give you some good news about our timeliness update. For several years now, we've not had great news about timeliness, but we have officially met timeliness as of May 2nd. We were required to be under 1.5 of our entitlement amount, so 1.5 times our entitlement in our bank that's available to us. We made it down to 1.48. We spent about almost $1.5 million in 6 weeks of specifically CDBG funds. And that was really due to the small cities and the nonprofits that we have contracts with being really working hard to spend those funds and thinking outside of the box. We've had a couple of the jurisdictions who normally don't bill us for staff time. It is an eligible expense. They went ahead and billed it instead of it being match. So they billed it to us, and we were able to use that. They ordered things that they needed for the project in advance, like the plaque, or with the G Creek project, they ordered the light beacons for the pedestrian crosswalk, things that they would normally wait to purchase. They went ahead and purchased ahead of time so that they could have them and use that funding. So it was really, really helpful. You can see that we made it. It was really, that 1.48 is only about $40,000. So it was really close. I was sweating it up until the very end, but we wouldn't have been able to do it without all the hard work from our nonprofits and our cities, and really thinking outside the box of what we could do to make timeless. So we are officially timely. And now we got to start working on next year. So no slowing down. We want to make sure that we get all those older projects up and moving so that we can get those dollars spent and not have to worry about timeliness again next year.
This is Michael again. I do want to say that, that those expenditures in 6 weeks, yes, that's when the invoices were paid in a 6-week period. Those expenses were done. But the work to be able to expend all that, the solicitations, et cetera, that's been a year-long process that everyone here has engaged in. So thank you to the cities, thank you to the proposers, thank you to staff. It wasn't just a crunch 6 weeks. Certainly there was a crunch 6 weeks to get it done, but the work to make that possible has just been ongoing. Yeah.
And I'd also like to give a big shout out and thanks to our auditor's office. They were really strategic in helping us. A lot of the expenses were through our home buyer programs, to where the nonprofits were selling so many houses that they weren't able to have the funds to pay the down payments in advance. So we worked with the auditor's office, and we were okay with paying them in advance and paying so that they would have the money right before they went to closing and be able to do that. So and immediate pays galore were happening, which, is really stressful for the auditor's office to have to go through. So it was a huge team effort to get us there. And we really appreciate everyone that was involved.
That is fantastic news. So thank you so much for your hard work. And as Michael said, for everybody that was involved in this process. I've been serving as chair of UCPB. This is my 4th year, and I think we were talking about this when we very first started. So excellent news to see that has taken place, and great job.
Thank you. Great job to everyone. The next item is the 2026 Annual Action Plan that was submitted on May 14th. It's due to HUD by May 15th, so we got it in on time. We do expect the CDBG and home grant agreements this fall, and our contracts for our new public service programs are drafted. They're going through the process, and will start on July 1. They have we're basically just waiting for certificates of insurance from the 2 agencies that were awarded funding before we can fully execute those contracts. We also just last week received a notification from Ridgefield that they are rescinding their program year 2024 Sargent Street project. They have indicated that the benefits and the amount of funding that they were awarded is not sufficient to meet all of the requirements that are coming along for the CDBG funds. They didn't state which requirements, but I'm fairly certain BABA is one of those requirements that is just made it's so expensive to administer and to track. And so it's making it very difficult. We are hearing this across the country that the Build America, Buy America BABA program is just very onerous in the administrative requirements for it. We've done trainings. We also agree with that statement. And so I'm sure that was part of the reason that that Ridgefield has decided to rescind they had been awarded $200,000. So it's not penciling out for them to move forward with that. So we will be following our policy of contingency funding. So for the Ridgefield reallocation, Greater Vancouver Chamber of Commerce is the CDBG contingency project and will get fully funded. Staff were also able to kind of adjust the funding for Proud Ground. They were going to get a mix of CDBG and home funding, but we were able to fully fund Proud Ground with the CDBG side, and then we can move the home funds to the home contingency project, which is Evergreen Habitat for Humanity's home buyer program. It leaves about $6,000 left that's unallocated. We will put that into our contingencies just in case any project specific go over, need additional, a slight amount of additional dollars. Those that are not spent will get allocated into the next request for allocation round.
Question on that. Which programs were made whole, meaning that was able to fill the gap on what we were unable to fund last time, and which ones were not even funded that this was able to fund?
So all of through the funding we had originally when we did the allocations, everyone was made whole. There was nobody that was shorted on their allocations. So this now fully funds 2 more programs that were not funded before.
Great. Fantastic.
Question.
Yes.
Sorry, my memory may not be serving me, but I thought Battlegrounds actually wasn't able to be fully funded and we were putting it on the next election cycle, or not next election cycle, but the next year.
Which Battleground project are you thinking? Because the Battleground, we did fund the Battleground North Parkway Sidewalks project. That was one that we had taken their previous funding. They did get their full award in this allocation round.
Yeah, I'm going to have to, I'll get back to you on that one because I thought there was one more. And it's escaping me. I don't know if it was Clark or there's just so many street funds, right? There's so many street
there's a lot of projects that we need to get.
We do have Mark Herstig on the line also. I don't know if he wants to chime in on this one because he watches this obviously more than a city councilor does.
There is one Battleground project that we did reduce the funding by, I think it was $2,500, something close to that. And that is the Northeast First project. But the reason we did that was the funding that they would have received would have triggered the BABA requirements. And so we reduced it by that small amount so that the BABA requirements wouldn't be. We were able to full fund it with older funds, and that way we could move that one forward without having BABA triggered, which would be significantly more expensive than the $25 or $3,500 that we reduced it by.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, we just have a little bit more in the program updates. We wanted to give the board an update on the Battleground building. The county council voted in favor of selling the building at fair market value based on the recommendation from the Urban County Policy Board. That was done on May 5th. HUD requires notification to affected citizens before the sale of the building due to the change in use. It's one of those requirements that comes around because the building was funded with CDBG funds. We are currently looking at all of the regulations to ensure that we meet the compliance correctly. How do we do that? Notification, does it need to be posted in the newspaper? Can it be just an email? Whatever we do, we'll include an email specifically to CMAR so that they can distribute it to the clients that were using that building for services to make sure that they are informed. Internal Services is now working on scheduling the appraisal of the building so that they can then put it out on the market for sale, and they will be notifying CMAR the date that the building needs to be vacated. We are trying to work with them to give CMAR as long as they possibly can to be in that building so they have as much time. Right now, we're thinking it'll be the end of the year, but we will adjust that as needed based on the sale of the building. And then if it's sold in time, which is, it's any time before March, basically, we will use the funds in our next request for application when we do the allocations in March of 2027. Any questions for the Battleground building update?
No, thank you for that update.
Very welcome. That is all we have for program updates.
Oh, yes. That puts me back online here. All right, so we will go ahead now and move forward to item 6, which is approval of Urban County Policy Board application and funding guide updates.
So every year before we get started on the request for application for the next year, we look through the Urban County Policy Board application and funding guidelines to see if there's anything that needs to be updated. And we did find a few changes that we are proposing to the board today. There's 3 sides of information that I'm going to go through. You also received a copy of the marked up version late last week. I apologize that we couldn't get it to you earlier. There was a lot going on. And so you have a redlined version that you can look through if you have any questions. I'm going to go over the bigger changes in our presentation today so that you can have that information. So the first primary change is under the applications section. Section 1 is been moved and updated. This section was previously under the funding guidelines as section 3. So we made some changes to it and we moved it up. We think it's more appropriate to be in this application section versus being down in the funding section. This section is going to discuss how we structure the RFA as far as the different categories. We typically, before we had said there's only 2 categories, really focused it on the public facility and neighborhood improvements. Now we've really outlined it. So we talk about all 4 of the categories that we do the applications for both CDBG and home, and taking the guidance that we've received from the board last year, have put in the policy how we allocate how the applications, if they are going to compete against each other within that category. So for asset and economic development, both the home buyer and businesses is all one group for the same pot of funds. So they basically compete against each other. Per the board, we have separated out the public facilities from the neighborhood improvements. So those get separate amounts into their own categories. They do not compete against each other. Same with the affordable housing and homelessness. TBRA and the construction or rehab of new multifamily housing, they don't compete against each other. So this just formalizes that and puts it in an appropriate place of the policies. The second change to the policies that we are proposing is section 11. It is a new section. This section states that acquisition and or construction projects, they must have sufficient design completed to determine the level of environmental review required for the activity and to determine if Uniform Relocation Act regulations will be applicable. In our application, the relocation, there's a very specific process that has to be followed with notification almost as soon as you submit your application. We've had a few different projects over the last few years that have indicated in their application that they would not have relocation involved. And once they've done more design, determined that there was. This would have affected if they would have been scored. And we don't think that's fair to the ones that are fully have enough design and are putting that information into their application. So the other issue that we're coming across is the environmental reviews. We really need to be able to do an environmental review. We need to have 30% of the design complete. We don't want to necessarily cause extra work for the applicants, but we also can't really assess the project as a concept. It needs to have sufficient design completed to be able to accurately answer the questions within the application, which do have points tied to them. So we would like to make this change in the application so that it is a little bit more clear of what is going to happen. In the guidelines, you'll see that we are proposing that if an application is later determined to have impacts specifically from URA, then we would look at the scoring at that time and make the adjustments. We would look at all of the applications that had been submitted and update the ranking of the scoring. And then if there is an impact, we would either rescind their funding and move it to the application that would have been funded had this information been provided in their application. If there's no impact, obviously we would just move forward. We want to put this in writing so we as staff can just move forward with making this determination. It brings a sense of fairness for all of the applications. And really sets a level of what we need to have, how much information needs to be designed before they can submit application. If you're designing a project as submitting an application for a project that is just a concept of something you would like to do, that is not the right time. It is not going to move fast enough. We've been seeing that with our timeliness issues and things that are taking forever. So this is one of those things that we had thought through when we were talking about timeliness and also looking at making sure that we meet all of the requirements. One thing that I think a lot of cities didn't realize is temporary construction easements fall under the Uniform Relocation Act, where we have to, if we're temporarily using somebody's property for the construction, we have to pay them for that. So all of these requirements get triggered very early on. I will stop with that one because I know that one's probably a big change and might have questions.
My first question would be, we've had not internal, but during our meetings, we have had multiple discussions around this, but not necessarily with this change that you're suggesting. Have you communicated directly with the various jurisdictions to get their thoughts on how this would impact them and their ability or willingness to apply?
We have not.
So I would invite anybody on the staff side or elected side, if they so choose, to provide any comments at this time on their initial thoughts on this.
It looks like Tracy has raised their hand.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Yes, so we're very familiar with this, having to pay for temporary easements. Anytime you do federal funding, that's a requirement regardless. So it isn't a surprise to us, and it's something that we actually have been budgeting for lately. So as far as we're concerned, that would be absolutely fine in our end. We just need to make sure that we'd have to account for it on these types of programs as well.
Thank you for that. Is there anybody else that wants to chime in? Okay, and just a procedural question. Are you asking us to give you the thumbs up on this today, or is this going to come back to us?
We're hoping to get this approved today so that we can make sure that we incorporate that correctly in the funding guides moving forward. There are a few more updates that we're recommending, and I'll leave it to you if you'd like to vote on more like each item, each section, or just do a package at the end.
Okay, let's, unless there's anybody else that wants to speak particularly to this issue, let's go ahead and we'll move forward and then we'll have that discussion at the end.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say I had my hand raised, but I have no problem waiting till the end to have that discussion, Chair.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I can't see your hand on the screen, so.
I apologize, I missed that, Counselor.
No worries.
Okay, so under the funding guidelines, so this is the second portion of our application and funding guidelines. Under the funding portion, section 1 is also a new updated, and it combines other sections under 1. This is a discussion around the loan process for the different projects that we do. We had some disjointed, multiple different sections in there. Sections 5, 6, and 9 all kind of discussed what would be a grant, what would be a loan, what could be a half loan, what percentage we would do, things like that. Staff are trying to make sure that we are consistently following a process and protocol for any of our existing loans and establishing new loans. In this, we have determined that a standalone policy is really required to be able to fully have a complete policy around what types of activities will be grants, which will be forgivable loans, which will be full loans, which will be half forgivable, half loan, that type of thing. So, and then when would we look at modifying those loan terms and just making sure that we are consistent and applying a consistent process. So we have created a full loan. It's like 8 pages long for this doing the loan process. And it breaks down all of the different components of something that we would think about, along with created a form that if agencies are looking to modify their existing loan, they would fill that out. It would give us the information and we could do a more objective review of the request to then look at if that's something that we would want to look at doing it and modifying those terms, rather than having something where they just randomly ask us questions, and depending on who the staff is at that time, they may or may not approve the loan modification or what that loan modification might look like. So we are taking a lot of the content out of the application and funding guidelines and have moved it into its own specific policy where it's very clear and outlined so that we can follow that.
This is Michael Torres. I would like to call out that specific to loans, this has been an area of weakness, at least from my perspective, over the past 10 years of working with Clark County in this program. Consistency in loans is very difficult to manage because we're talking about projects that have compliance requirements that often go through decades with funding that has forgiveness, has deferrals and forgiveness included over periods of decades, where we've often found that the staff in all the entities involved have changed a couple times by the time a need arises and a request is made. So formalizing in policy the practice is extremely important for ensuring that not only are loans being done effectively, but that they're also being done consistently and fairly over time with different parties. Because, you know, if we get VHA, for example, asking us for forgiveness of a loan, and you have a separate party, let's say Second Step Housing or Habitat for Humanity, in a different project, in a different moment, asking us for forgiveness of a loan with very similar circumstances, it is entirely possible to have very different answers for those entities. And if we got audited specific to our loan portfolio, that could be an area of risk if it's not managed well. So, you know, I don't think there's anything in there that's particularly different than what we've been doing or how we've been trying to approach loans, but we are trying to formalize it and do it in a way where all the little things that we've checked in and discussed as staff and with the UCPB over time is consolidated in one document.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think we have ever processed any loans since I've been a part of the Urban County Policy Board. Am I wrong on that?
So we do, almost all of our bigger projects, our multifamily projects, are some sort of loan. Weaver Creek, for example, is a loan, but we do that on our end. So that's something that's done after the fact. We negotiate with the applicant on the requirements that are needed. Low-income housing tax credits, they have very specific guidelines that require us to actually have a at least 1% loan in place. And we also look at how long are we going to defer the loan because of low-income housing tax credits and the requirements they have there. So it really comes down to what is the final funding in those larger projects that are going to dictate, and then that helps us determine what our loans will look like. Primarily, our biggest requirement is, one, the Urban County Policy Board has historically wanted to recoup the funds that we put in these larger multi-housing family projects so that we can then use them for future projects. So that's one component that's very important in our policy. And then the second is that we need to meet the home affordability period when we use home funds. So we want to make sure that we have legal documents, specifically a covenant in place that goes through the appropriate affordability period for that type of project. So that kind of sets the base, but then we negotiate with the applicant based on that project on how much will that interest rate be? Are there any other requirements that need to be in there? What will the home assisted units, the number of units will be that they have to meet specific compliance requirements on for the life of the affordability period? So all of that is really done after the project has been selected by the Urban County Policy Board. So you guys don't typically see that, but we did have it in our policies. So we just wanted to make sure that we were transparent with the board, saying that, hey, we are removing some of this language here because we've put it in a new loan that's really more in depth for staff to follow.
Okay. Any questions on that? When we circle back, I'm definitely going to bring this one up. But
Yeah.
I think we're okay to move on at this point. I don't see any hands.
Me too. I'm waiting till the end, but I'm definitely going to have a few questions on each slide so far.
I will also apologize because I kind of jumped. So section 1 in the new policies that you have that were distributed to you really is actually talking about funding. This is a newer section. It also does combine and update some sections, but this is kind of, in the first section under the application, we talked about the categories and how they're going to compete against how applications will compete against each other in the first during the application process. Section 1 of the funding guidelines is takes in the guidance that we received from the Urban County Policy Board to indicate how much funding we're going to be putting into each category. As you all know, we don't really know until we get to our funding time how much money we're going to have. But in previous guidance from the board, we have talked about how much funding would be distributed between the public facility neighborhood improvement category versus the asset and economic development category when it comes to our CDBG funds. How much we would have in the public facilities and neighborhood improvements category for each of those. What is the percent split in each of those categories within the larger category. And this section 1 actually just takes that and puts it in writing as how we would move forward. So that's just a more a specific policy that we will follow. It can be changed in the future if the board decides that they want to move in a different direction on how the split is. We've had questions in the past of, well, how does the staff determine how much money is going to be in those categories? This just puts that component in writing, so you have it there. And then loans, section 2 is the one that talks about the loans, where we've removed some of that language, moved it into the loan management policy. And then the old section 2 has been completely removed because it's part of the new loan policy. And then the last slide is just some minor changes. So you'll see in there some markup changes, just language to make the policies more clear. We never stated that these funds come from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which was interesting to me. There's one section where we just said that we were specifically doing this for federal funds. So there's some minor changes to word choice or making sure that the policies were clear. There's not very many of those changes, just a couple of them. We also made an update to which agencies will require an administrative review, specifically so during the application process, just more clearly stating it within the policies. And then we did some corrections to Exhibit 1, which is a table that really helps the applicants understand what category they would apply for their type of project. There were some check marks that were in the wrong places, and we just wanted to make sure that that was clear. So those are all of the changes. There's a lot more red in the policy than it looks like, but it's mainly because we just moved things around to put things together.
Yeah. Okay. Just a couple of questions before we move on before we discuss some of these. Can you tell me a little bit in terms of timing and priority, what you're hoping to achieve, when that needs to be done with, and what that means for a timeline, like whether we can bring these back for consideration in our next meeting or what you need from us today to move forward?
So this is an internal audience. I mean, obviously this is a public document when we formalize it, but this is really for the Urban County Policy Board to have a framework and structure of how they operate, and for us as staff to have a framework and structure to operate consistently, and so that you, the Urban County Policy Board, can understand what we are doing. So there are no deadlines in terms of compliance issues. We do use this policy and structure and make these decisions as we do the guidelines for the request for applications, the solicitation that we're going to be talking about next. So, I think that we do have a lot of flexibility as applies to this policy. What is important to me as manager and to us as staff is that the Urban County Policy Board understands the policy and that it reflects your intent for us to follow. So having said that, you can approve or not approve parts of it and and we can edit moving forward because this is strictly an internal document. But our deadline is just the time that we need to issue a finalized RFA solicitation in October, which requires a lot of work, in terms of backwards planning, like we're working on it now or starting to work on it now. And some of what would be published is reflected in here. So is there anything, Rebecca, that you'd like to add to that or edit to that?
Yeah, I think the big deal is, or the big thing is, whatever is not approved, we won't have time because our next meeting is not until September, and we really have to have final RFA documents by that time or very close to final documents to post for the RFA to go live on October 1st. So anything that's not approved, we just would not incorporate into this next round of the request for applications, which means we would approve them a year from now for the following, or not approve them at all. I mean, that's why we're bringing them here to the board, is to get your feedback. So
I can say, I don't think there's anything in here that's a radical departure from current practice. It's more of a, it's putting it on paper, I feel good that as staff, we really try to bring to the board issues and get your guidance, before we take action. And, we don't do a lot of staff running this program. We really do try to follow your intent. And we've been doing that. This doesn't change it, but I think having it in writing so that we can reference it and you can reference it. And if anyone has any questions, the public can reference it. It gives the structure of how we've been doing things and why.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that background. With that having been said, I'll go ahead and open the floor at this time to Victoria. She's mentioned she had some comments. So go ahead.
Thank you, actually. There's a lot here to unpack. Although I appreciate what staff has proposed to us today, it makes a lot of sense. At the same time, I don't feel comfortable with just rushing through this and making these changes. I know that you just made us aware that our next meeting is September, but it makes me want to ask if we are able to call a sooner meeting, so it gives us as in districts the opportunity to just take this back, absorb what we've been given today, and really make sure that we're doing our due diligence to understand what's presented to us today and bring this forward at our next meeting, but not the next meeting, but maybe call one sooner. So it still allows us the opportunity to do our due diligence and also give you staff the opportunity to meet your guidelines and your goals, your timeframes. That's number one. Also, I am concerned that we give public the opportunity to speak, but when you go online, what will they be speaking to? Because I don't see anywhere where this document has been attached for the public's viewing, so they have something to reference and base their comments on. And so I was wondering if there's a reason why we don't place for citizens viewing the same packet that we get. Because now, please, here's the clarifying question: is everything that we're speaking on today based on that 9-page document that you sent us out in our packets?
So under this section of the agenda, yes, any of the changes to that are within the document that we sent out on Thursday, I believe it was.
Correct. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So I guess my next question, I'll do these one parts if it's okay, because I know I gave a lot in there. Is there a reason why we don't place that packet on the agenda for the public to view?
I think just historically, we've only posted the agenda and the minutes. I think that's the minimum requirement to meet the Open Public Meeting Act. And so that's what we've done. There is, because of staff capacity, as I would have loved to have gotten this to you guys earlier, but because of time, I wasn't able to get all of the updates into the document. So staff capacity does play a lot into when we are giving things last minute. Unfortunately. Michael might be able to speak more.
Yeah, in terms of we would be perfectly, as staff and in terms of compliance and law, we would have absolutely no issue or objection expanding the audience. I mean, everything we do is public work. So, as far as opportunities for the public to access it. I think we'd be supportive of anything we can do. From my perspective, our limits are really time, how much time is available to do things, and how much staff capacity do we have to do what is required in that amount of time. So our starting point is generally what is required by, what is required for compliance, because there's a lot, and that fills up our time pretty well. But anything additional, like if the UCPB would like to do, if we can, we're happy to do it, to the extent we can, and talk about it if we can't.
Thank you. And I can appreciate the understaffing issues, and I do sympathize for that. I'm also, though, elected by the people, and I would to see, and I know this isn't the time to be bringing this up, but I just feel like it's on my mind, and it is a little concerning. So what you choose to do with that chair or this board moving forward with that concern, asking staff at some point to potentially put these packets on the agenda for public viewing, I would appreciate that as a conversation to be had at whenever we feel is the most appropriate time, maybe at the next meeting, placing that on our agenda item, or if everybody's okay with just, thumbs up, whatever. But I do also appreciate, like I said, the understaffing issues. I will go back to when the chair had mentioned, wanting to get some insight from the district and allowing us the opportunity to speak at that time. But my other concern is other stakeholders that this could be potentially, having an impact on, and them being able to have this option as well, seeing what's on the agenda packet, all of these new requirements within the policy. I have never had to go through this application process. And so I would like to get, speak to one of the stakeholders, or try to get the insight or the understanding of these different stakeholders as well. So I'm very reluctant, and I do apologize. I know that we have timeframes that we have to meet. I'm just very reluctant to just jump in on this and vote so quickly.
I will say today, for staff, we appreciate, and the feedback, and that's why we want to make sure that we bring this to you. I will say the only thing new is that section 11 with the talking about having the design at 30%, and what happens if an applicant puts in an application that we later determine should have received negative points. So all of the other things are just really tightening up and putting into the policy the guidance that we've received before. So it might be easier to just approve all of those and hold the section 11 that's on your screen for a future, and then we can at least make sure that that's incorporated into the funding guides that we develop for the application. Staff are also open to having more meetings regularly, extending our meetings that we have now. We're at the will of the board on how frequently you want to meet. Currently, we are trying to do 5 to 6 meetings per year. We do 3 right up front, for the application process, but during the rest of the year, if the board would like to meet more often, our bylaws only state a requirement of having at least 5 meetings per year. So anything over that we're meeting the requirement. Staff have also been doing a lot of work to really bring the board in and educate the board on a lot of very complex compliance requirements that we have to meet, which we are filling our agendas where we hadn't been before. So if the board is interested in doing more meetings, we are very happy with doing more meetings, and that means we can, not pack the meetings as much, or we can, it'll provide us the opportunity to bring a policy one meeting and get it approved at another meeting, which would give you more time to go through that process.
Great, thank you. So I want to circle back real quick, and then we'll come back to this. I want to start off and have a very quick discussion on your first point, Victoria, which was public access to our meeting documents. I'll be honest with you. I just went to the website and looked because I've always just engaged with your emails in terms of content. And it is kind of a surprise to me that that's not available to folks online, that they have to actually show up to the meeting to get that information. Public, obviously, all of the members of the Urban County Policy Board have previous access to that. My thoughts are, I think that would be a benefit to the public for sure. What does everybody else think?
No, I agree with that. This is Tracy from the center.
I concur with that as well. This is Matt Cole from Ridgefield.
Okay, would there be anybody opposed to that? Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that opportunity. Thank you for bringing that up, Victoria. That's an important thing to have a discussion on.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Would the board want those documents all to be provided the week before, like we do now with the agenda? That will cause issues for being able to put documents together for the meeting. Not that we won't do our best to meet those requirements, but just gives me an idea of when I need to focus, where my priorities need to be to make sure I get all of the documents updated. Like the PowerPoint usually is not done until Friday before we come to the meeting, that type of thing.
And
So for
I
me,
would, oh yeah,
go
sorry.
ahead. Go
I was
ahead,
just going
Victoria.
to say, I don't think the PowerPoint presentation needs to be available. I'm just thinking to reflecting to our own board in our district, and probably like all of us here, is you at least just have like that document would be on there. Anything that would allow the public to see what are some amendments or recommended changes or a new or removal of language that could cause an effect to policies and a disruption in certain areas, or so yeah, just like example, just to be placing the like you did that 9-page document. I wouldn't suggest putting the PowerPoint presentation on there. And I would also finish up by saying, and I don't know what the current, I do apologize, I don't know what the current policies are on when you need to have hours ready, but like for our own board, it's, like we have a Monday night meeting and the citizens have to have it by Wednesday night. So I don't want to put a lot of pressure on, already our staff that's already pressed and have a lot on their plate, but I would be comfortable with, a Thursday evening at the latest. But I'll refer to the rest of this committee and what their desire is for that.
I believe legally you're only required to put it out to the public 24 hours in advance, but we here at the city for our council meetings put things out 48 hours in advance. But I believe our attorney advises that legally it's only 24 hours made available to the public. But I would think if we've got it in there 48 hours, that might be a question you guys could check since you're changing it. But I think the answer is you only have to have it available 24 hours in advance. But as a courtesy, we do it a little sooner.
I question, this is Michael Torres to Rebecca, and I guess also to Urban County Policy Board. So if the package that we send, the email package that we send to the Urban County Policy Board, if at the same time we basically posted those same documents online at that time, which is, that's as fast as we can produce those, that's when you get them, is when we have them done. How hard would that be if we put that online?
So we have historically posted the agenda and sent it 1 week in advance. And I would definitely still continue to do the agenda with the minutes. And then if there are any additional documents, I think Thursday is something I can do. I don't think that will be too difficult.
Awesome.
So this would be my suggestion, would be kind of a compromise, because I'll be honest with you, I don't know how many people will actually use this, if any, to be quite frankly, but I still think it's important to have that as available. So I would be supportive of not really even having a deadline, but that when you provide that information to the board, you also place it online. So it doesn't give you like a hard stop. And then I would probably put something on the agenda that says this agenda will be updated with documents as they become available. So just letting people know that the agenda's there, but maybe not all the supporting documents have been posted yet. And I think it would be beneficial to put the presentation on there. But again, no hard deadline, just when it's available. What does everybody think of that?
I think Michael Torres had, it seemed pretty simple and sweet. When you give it to us, just at the same time, throw it up online for the citizens as well. I also agree with the other council member that, 48 hours is a good timeline as well.
Yeah, we would want to make sure that we give the board a week to look at the agenda and let us know who will be in attendance. So I don't know that as staff, I would recommend changing that 1 week timeline for the agenda component of it. And I think we can commit to having everything posted by Thursday, by end of day on Thursday.
Okay, great.
And I appreciate this feedback from the Urban County Policy Board. Thank you.
Okay, we have officially killed that item. Okay,
Now,
so the second one that
change, sorry, Chair, or is that something that we need to make a motion for to amend like our bylaws or policies or anything, or is that?
I don't believe so. At this point, it's just really inner work among staff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on then to the URA discussion. And Victoria, thank you for your comments on that. I do share my concerns with that as well. We had Tracy chime in. I don't, how many jurisdictions do we have represented today?
We have
Small cities.
4, besides 5, no, actually 6 jurisdictions out of 8.
Out of 8.
Yes.
Okay, so we have some folks that weren't here today. To me, I think from the Urban County Board's perspective and from staff's perspectives, I think this really makes sense. I just do want to hear, I want the ability to hear from the cities directly if they foresee this as being a challenge. I really don't know. You folks probably do a lot more than I do, and I don't know if we should maybe bring this item up. And I am open to an additional meeting. That's a whole nother thing. We got lots of things that we brought up here. So some of this, just given our time, we're going to have to table some of this at this point. So we have 15 minutes left.
And there are some RFA specific training discussions that we want to have.
Okay. How much time do we need for the RFA planning?
Probably 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Depending on how many questions there are.
So I think, honestly, I mean, these are some pretty important issues I think that we're not quite ready to move forward on. So I would ask, for me at this point, I would prefer to call a special meeting, an additional meeting. I would like to open up to the board on their thoughts with this.
So the special meeting would need to be either July or August, and we would need to make sure that we do have quorum for that to be able to make these approvals.
I would be okay meeting in July or August. This is Tracy.
And it probably could be.
I'd be okay as well in July or August.
This is Stephanie. I could do July or August as well.
Great. I think that's fantastic. Then that would still give you enough time to perhaps include it. Okay, so we could iron through those fine-tuned details and give you direction at that time. And I think we probably schedule it for just an hour, but we probably can get through it, I would imagine, in like a half hour.
Yeah, we could do we'll do a regular time, but try to get it. We won't add too many extra things. We'll do minutes and whatever is required that we complete in that time.
And then the other thing that I think I would like to ask is our meetings are packed. They are. And so I would hope that you guys can kind of put your heads together and come up with an idea for how we can, I don't think there's any way to reduce the content. So maybe some suggestions on how we can better have additional meetings or whatever that looks like that you think would help us to be able to flesh these ideas out, give you guys enough time to prepare everything, to where the whole system kind of works a little bit better.
Yeah, so pre-pandemic, we actually met for 2 hours. It was a
hours?
2-hour meeting. Regularly, we didn't use that time the whole time. Again, we didn't bring as many topics for discussion
Okay.
at that time.
All right.
But that is one option that we could do, is move the hours back to 2 hours, meetings back to 2 hours. And we'll meet as often as the board would like us to meet.
Absolutely, and that's the bottom line. Like, a lot of the structure that we have has been based on board preference previously. I think that there's enough substance that happens over the course of a year, and enough compliance, and enough desire on the part of UCPB and staff for UCPB to actually give some active feedback on ongoing issues, and staff desire to be responsive to that I personally would recommend meeting on a monthly basis, 2 hours a meeting, which has not been what we've done generally. But I think that there's if we could use that time productively, and it would not be a waste of anyone's time. Having said that, we will respond to whatever the UCP wants to do.
And I'm happy to bring that into our special meeting.
Yes, that's what I was just going to say. Perfect for the discussion next month or August. So we'll rely on you to figure out, maybe do like a doodle poll to see which would work best, either July or August. Okay, with that, I don't know.
Real quick. Oh, sorry, Chair.
Go ahead.
Interject real quick. Okay. I would just say, first off, I know you just said did a poll, but my mind was already wanting to say I'm good for July or August. Just check my schedule. And secondly, my only concern with us doing this on a monthly thing, which I'm fine with doing, but we just had talked about how understaffed you guys are. And I don't want, I'm thinking, and I'll put this, to the next one, but maybe even in every other month as a potential, just a thought on our meetings.
Yeah, so bring ideas to us next month. And then the other thing too is I would also like to have a discussion on the loans section of this as well.
Yes.
So I don't know, we didn't really officially have any action on this. Is more a thumbs up. Do I need a motion to table this until next meeting, or do I need a motion for a special meeting?
We don't have to do a motion for a special meeting because it's not in the work plan, but we do indicate in the work plan that additional meetings will be scheduled as needed. And would the board like to table the entire policy discussion, or do you want us to move forward with pulling the new section 11 and the loan components, and approve the other things which we're just tidying up? And
will it be helpfully significant for you for us to approve a portion of it, or would it, if we met in July or August, would it not really make a material difference?
I don't think it'll make a material difference. So
I think it'd be cleaner just to table the whole thing at this point. Is everybody okay with that?
So yeah, I'll make a motion, Councilmember Ferrer from Battleground, to motion until either August or July to the next meeting.
Okay.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Sounds good. All right. Thank you for that discussion. We will move forward then to our last item that we're going to get to, which is RF8 planning.
Yes. And so I'm going to go a little bit fast. And this might be something we also table to the next, or at least component of it. So as we're looking at our RFA for doing this next round, we had a few discussion topics we wanted to have with the board. Discussion one is looking at the public services priority areas that we had determined for the last request for application. As staff are learning more about public services and how they work and what's eligible under each of the different matrix items, we realized that the housing counseling is not really what the intent was in our previous discussions about adding it as a priority area. It really is specific to providing housing counseling, so independent case management for homeowners or renters but it can't be tied to another eligible project, and it can only be done by certified housing counseling agencies, not more in that general idea of we know that housing is an issue and being able to do that. So we would recommend that we change that category from housing counseling to a category called subsistence payments. The subsistence payments can provide up to 3 months of emergency payments on behalf of a household, generally for the purpose of preventing or ending homelessness. So that would really tie in more into the idea and the discussions that we had last year when we were talking about public services. So just changing it from that one to the others. And then we just wanted to see if there were any other priority services that the board would like to include in the RFA this year. This is just a reminder of the all of the different types of eligible activities that we talked about. The highlighted green are the ones that are currently priority services. The yellow is the subsistence payments that I was just mentioning that I recommend we change over to.
I can't hear you. Did you stop talking or did I lose?
Yeah, it went silent.
Okay.
Did you have a comment?
Well, I'm wondering, why are we changing the language? Like, what's the benefit to changing it?
So for the housing counseling, we found in the regulations that we don't really have any agencies that can do that work. So it doesn't make sense to have that as a priority area. The conversation that we had last year was around making it a priority, housing assistance a priority, because we are in a housing crisis. So the housing counseling only doesn't fit what our actual intent was, whereas the subsistence payments does. So this just allows us to change it in the funding guide and make sure that we appropriately put that information for the application.
Okay. So are we getting rid of counseling altogether, and because it doesn't match the intent of what we were going for, therefore we're changing the title to the substance, or the subsistence payments. I need glasses really bad.
Yes,
I got
correct.
zoom in here. Okay. Okay. And so
And then
my concern is, so if we get rid of the counseling side of it, I look at that as like, what will be, so has nobody gone after any funding underneath that language though? Because I mean, when you hear counseling and then the payments, those are two totally different services that are being provided. And I just want to make sure that we're not dropping or losing anybody that might have already applied or put in an application for funding.
no, so the housing counseling actually qualifies under the asset and economic development for the home buyer assistance. So there's still agencies that can come in for providing housing counseling services for home buyers under asset and economic development. Then they would, we don't want them applying under two different categories. And that is actually what happened this last year. So we asked them to pick a category to move forward in. We wouldn't be losing the services because they have to be a certified housing counseling agency or a CBDO, which is a community-based development organization. Thank you, Michael. And we don't have any of those here in Clark County. So it really is just not a category we need to have under public services, which is very limited in the amount of funding we can put into it, because by regulation, we can only do 15% of our entitlement amount. So it can still be, the home buyer education can still be done under asset and economic development. And this would free up the ability to do emergency payments under the subsistence payments category. That would
Thank you
be.
for clarifying. No, I do appreciate that. Thank you.
So once you said that it's still available in one category, we're just clarifying which category it comes from. I definitely would agree with that. So we don't get one over here and one over there. My concern is more with the comment that you made about there's nobody in Clark County that qualifies. So nobody is providing this thing. And I look at it as like payment assistance is treating the symptom. counseling is really treating the issue that's causing the symptom. And I think it's important. So we don't have enough time at this point, but I would like to have a discussion on maybe that need is being filled in our community by other sources. I don't know, but
Yes, I think this is not semantics. This is real. Case management and counseling around housing and housing stability is actively happening. Housing counseling as defined by HUD is a very specific thing around home ownership and the process of purchasing a home. And the only agencies that it's a certification that HUD requires for that specific type of service. And the only agencies that HUD allows to do that are CBDOs, the community-based development organizations. So the housing counseling that we've generally been talking about is absolutely taking place. The housing counseling HUD is talking about, where you're saying housing counseling only, is not something that's taking place, and is not something that we've been talking about as an active need. If it does come up as an active need, it can still be provided in our solicitations that we do, but it would be under asset and economic development. It would not be under public services.
Great. Thank you. That takes care of my concerns. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? And does anybody have any thoughts about the priorities that we have listed? These are the same as last year, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
No, I'm okay with it.
Go ahead.
We heard an okay to move forward with that.
Okay.
The next topic that we wanted to discuss is a minimum scoring criteria. This we will definitely move. It'll be a lot more conversation. So I'll just really quick introduce it. We are looking at how we do the scoring process and see if the board would be interested in doing a minimum requirement for when it comes to scoring, if applications need to meet a certain threshold to be eligible for scoring. So we'll talk about a couple of ideas that staff had, and we'll bring that to our next meeting. The final question that we have is we heard at the last meeting that the board would like to get information ahead of time before the scoring is done. The scores are due by the board the first Monday of March, because we don't get the funding information until then anyways. So we've given the board as long as can to do the scoring. If we were to provide the scoring information earlier, we would need the board's time cut short so that we could put that together. Also, just want to clarify that the scoring information and the recommendations are two very different things, right? We get the scoring and then we put together the scoring recommendations based on how many applications can we score based on the scores that were received and the funding that we have available. So we want to have a discussion to see if to provide more information, if we wanted to adjust the timelines a little bit, and then see if the board is interested in having a post-scoring discussion after the action plan has been approved. So it would need to be after the May meeting. And we could talk more about the RFA, and it would help us in preparing for the next request for application. It would also be more fresh on your guys' mind for any, lessons learned, changes that need to happen to questions, other questions where maybe we're missing in the applications, or how we can support the board more. So we'll bring this back at our next special meeting since we are over time.
Sounds good. Thank you.
The last item on the agenda is the quarterly reports, and we will provide this in our follow-up email. It's just an overview of the quarterly reports, and we'll provide the notes that we would have given today at today's meeting for you.
Okay, great. That concludes our agenda at this point. We are right on the money here. So is there anything that is necessary for the good of the order before we close? Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for your comments and insightful thoughts into this. And thank you, staff, for your great work. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.